Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The former Lib Dem leader and committed Christian Tim Farron has said he regrets saying that gay sex was not a sin during last year's general election. He told Christian Radio he was foolish to allow himself to be pressured into saying something which he didn't believe was right. During the 2017 general election campaign, when he was Lib Dem leader, Tim Farron was asked repeatedly about his religious beliefs and specifically about whether he believed gay sex was a sin.
Do you think that having gay sex or being engaged in gay sex is sinful? Okay, look, I'm not going to give you an answer to that question because I believe... Why not, though? Well, and I'll tell you why. I'm not going to give you an answer to that question, and that is because one's personal faith is one's personal faith. What counts is your actions and your beliefs in politics.
He later said he didn't want people getting the wrong impression about his views.
Well, I don't believe gay sex is a sin. I take the view that as a political leader, though, my job is not to pontificate on theological matters.
Tim Farron stepped down as Lib Dem leader straight after the election, saying in a statement that he was torn between living as a faithful Christian and serving as a political leader. And in an interview with Premier Christian Radio yesterday, Mr Farron said he now regretted not being honest with himself at the time.
There are things that including that I said that I regret, and there was a sense in which I felt, look, I've got to get this off my table. What an opportunity for us! And all they wanted to do is talk about my, Christian beliefs and what it actually meant, and all the rest of it. And I would say foolishly and wrongly attempted to, push it away by giving an answer that frankly was not right.
Tim Farron there. Well, joining me now from Cambridge is the writer and commentator Anne Atkins and the Labour MP and former Anglican vicar Chris Bryant. Welcome to the studio to you, and welcome Anne Atkins to the programme. And shouldn't Tim Farron have had the courage of his convictions at the time and said that he thought gay sex was a sin?
Well, I think that's what he said yesterday, isn't it? But the difficulty is it's such a misleading question. And it's actually a very illiberal and homophobic question, as he pointed out yesterday, because Christians believe that we all sin. Sin is a sort of technical theological term, which in itself is quite misleading because it communicates to people who are not familiar with that jargon, condemnation and judgment and looking down on people, which is not what it means at all. It means it's defined by St Paul in the letter to Romans as falling short of the glory of God. And as Christians, we believe we all do that. And so the fact that he was put on the spot and asked about a particular minority is a very misleading thing. And if he had come out and said, yes, I do think gay sex is a sin, that would have been as misleading, if not more misleading, than what he actually did say. Because, I mean, what I find so disappointing was Vince Cable's tweet after Tim Farron stepped down, which was, dare I say, an extremely bitchy tweet, apart from anything else, but also very illiberal. He distanced himself from Tom Farron's views and said the Lib Dems have a long and proud history of supporting LGBT rights. Well, so does Tim Farron.
Right.
He has a long, proud history of supporting LGBT rights, which is the important thing, you see.
Yes, but in terms of your explanation about what is considered a sin or not, Tim Farron lied, didn't he, about his view? Straightforwardly, he told a lie.
Well, he has said yesterday that he wishes he had represented his views more truthfully. So I don't know why you're asking me that. You can ask Tim Farron that. But the point is
because
that
for the viewers, it's just to make it plain that he said one thing that he didn't mean, and now he's corrected it. So he lied at the time about something that was a fairly straightforward question.
I think you're being... I think lie is an extremely unfair term. He was caught off balance. He said something which he has subsequently said was not...
Let me try another term. Let me try another term with you. He bore false witness. From the Ten Commandments. He lied. Yes, exactly. He lied. He lied, and lying is a sin.
Right, but...
I mean, if I'm honest, I feel awfully sorry for him, because he's tied himself up in knots, and by the end of yesterday, I don't really know what he really thinks. My anxiety is...
you don't know what he thinks, because he was very clear.
Well, my anxiety is, I think the Church of England, and a lot of the churches are very conflicted about it as well, because on the one hand, they want to be supportive and caring towards LGBT people, but at the same... And most people, I think now, accept that your sexuality is not a choice that you have made. That is very different from 100 years ago or 200 years ago, when everybody thought you chose to be homosexual. And I think today the vast majority of Christians would accept that it's not a choice. And so then the question is whether churches want to support people in loving relationships or want to decry them and say that they're sinful.
Right, Anne, come back on that.
You're deliberately confusing two things, and you know you are. 150 years ago, people thought of the act rather than the orientation. Now people think of the orientation.
No,
Tim
both,
Farron
actually.
himself, Tim Farron himself has made it extremely clear that Christianity does not condemn sexual orientation. He himself has said that. The point is that, I mean, you're being far more illiberal than Tim Farron was, and so is Vince Cable, because you're condemning him for, you know, breaking one of the 10 Commandments. He himself made very clear yesterday, as all Christians believe, that we all break the 10 Commandments.
Let
Chris answer your claim.
Why are you so judgmental?
Anne, could you let me say something?
Yeah, I just hadn't finished my sentence. I just wanted to finish my sentence.
Yeah, go on, Chris.
It was quite a long paragraph. But anyway, look, as I said, I feel sympathetic towards him because it is perfectly legitimate for somebody to hold that view. I disagree with them. And he would have been, I think he would have been better off simply to have stated what his view was.
But would he? Now, so this is the politics of it. So, I mean, he was hounded during the election campaign, wasn't he, over this? And he was asked repeatedly, maybe fairly, I'm not making a comment about it, but do you think it is right that he should be hounded on this issue?
I think it's a legitimate question for voters to say of a party leader, what are your views on a variety of issues, including this? And how do you bring your religious belief into the policies that you vote for or don't vote for?
Right,
now,
but they
my memory, and I may be wrong on this, but my memory is that Tim didn't vote for same-sex marriage, third reading and second reading of the bill.
Well, actually, his voting record.
But on other matters,
absolutely, it is. Now, the point is, if they're a Labour colleague of yours in the House of Commons held those same views.
Oh, some do, and indeed I had a big row with Ruth Kelly once about this very issue. And in Labour's case, we had said that we were supporting same-sex civil partnerships and gay adoption. We were supporting that as part of our manifesto, and Ruth Kelly was opposed to it. And I said to her, well, in which case, in conscience, you shouldn't really be on the front bench of the Labour Party.
Right. I mean, and should he have sorted out in his mind, Tim Farron, how he was going to deal with this, bearing in mind, well, he was the leader of a British political party, of the Liberal Democrat Party, and would know and expect there to be questions along these lines to test those liberal policies. We've had the debate about what is liberal and illiberal, but shouldn't he have expected it and therefore prepared for it better? Well,
you see, a far more democratic and liberal question would have been, what is your record on LGBT rights, not what are your personal views, because the point he has tried to make, but nobody is really listening to what he's saying, is his personal views on this are not relevant. What's relevant is his public voting record, because his liberalism. You see, what is truly?
I think views do matter.
May I just finish this?
Let Anne finish up, and I'll come to you, Chris.
What is truly liberal is the quote, which I think has been misattributed to Voltaire, but it's still a fabulous quote. What is truly liberal is to disagree with you and support you anyway. Yes. Now that is Tim Farron's record.
Right. But
so the point of what his personal views are.
You're misquoting the misquote of Voltaire.
Well, hang on, Chris. Before we get
into this, I will defend
the
right for you to say it.
Before we get into this slightly sort of dense argument about who said what I want to know is it possible, as Anne has said, that you can have personal views that you hold dear, but actually it doesn't affect necessarily how you lead a political party? You can still support LGBT rights?
Yes, absolutely.
Well,
but I think he needed to make that clear. But can I just make the far bigger point for me, which is that actually gay young men and women commit suicide 6 times more frequently than their straight counterparts. Every time somebody adds into this equation a little bit more of the kind of critique and the criticism of homosexuality, whether it's homosexuality itself, innate homosexuality, or whether it is whether you engage in sexual acts, it adds to that sense of guilt and shame. And my anxiety for the Church of England is that I think, which is my church, in 200 years' time, people would say, you got this completely and utterly wrong. You now have this situation where for clergy, you're allowed to be gay, but you're not allowed. But you're even allowed to be in a civil partnership as long as you swear to God that it's celibate. I mean, this is a nonsense that they've got themselves tied up in knots in.
Right. Well, what about then the case of the Conservative MP Jacob Rees-Mogg? He's very clear about his views on gay marriage, on abortion. He thinks same-sex marriage is wrong.
I don't want him to be Prime Minister either.
No, and he tells it as it is. That is the better way to be, is it?
I think you should be honest and straightforward, yes.
Right.
I mean, and because I think voters actually respect people's courage. And if you're prepared to say, look, I personally think that homosexuality is wrong, or however you want to frame it, but I also believe that the law should treat everybody equally.
Right.
That is a perfectly legitimate position to be in.
But these people can't hold high office, that's what you're saying.
Well, I wouldn't vote for them.
No, but that's what's it.
But
should they not hold high office?
I'm not hounding anybody out of high office. I'm being very liberal. I mean, I'm even happy for Anne Atkins to try to stand for election and become something.
Well, there you go.
But I'm not going to vote for her.
Anne.
That's fine. I'm quite happy without your vote. Thank you very much. But dare I say, I think you're contradicting yourself. I totally agree with you that, of course, we must support. You know, we must all fight for people who feel suicidal and who feel criticised and feel got at. Which is why I think it's the question itself that is illiberal and homophobic. And I think the person who's dealt with it most wisely is Justin Welby, because he said, I'm not going to answer that. And quite right too, because if you do answer that contributes to young people, as you said, feeling judged and feeling criticised and so on. And what is really important is that, to come back to Tim Farron, his liberalism he is saying is much more important in his political career and in what he votes for than his personal view about certain things where he may disagree. All right,
let me ask Graham. Let me just bring Graham Brady in on this. Should Tim Farron have been clear the first time he was asked about it and stood by his personal view?
I think he should have done, and you know, I think he was hounded at the election, but he was hounded because people thought that he was hiding something, and he shouldn't have to.
Is it a fair question to ask? Do you think gay sex is a sin?
I think it is a fair question to ask.
What's your answer to it?
No, I don't.
Right. I mean, can politicians...
You haven't asked me,
Thanks for underlining that. I think I knew the answer. I mean, can politicians speak freely about their faith?
Well, I think in a way this is the underlying thing that really concerns me, is that I think there is a far more intolerant attitude in Britain than there used to be. I think people often are intolerant of people's faiths, religions, their political views sometimes, and I think we should be more open to listening to other people.
I sympathise with that,
really briefly.
But the only thing is, if you were a young person in Tim Farron's constituency, you went to his surgery and you were gay and you wanted to talk about the problems that you were having with homophobic bullying in school, you might worry if you thought that he was going to say, well, actually, I think homosexuality is a sin.
Can I just say, hang on, Anna, because we're going to have to stop it there, I'm afraid. Fascinating though it's been. We did ask Tim Farron actually to come and do an interview, but he said no, or he turned us down. Delighted that the two of you came on instead. Thank you.